Tonight, two former high-ranking cops blow the whistle.
Yeah, they claim they were forced to resign after they tried to expose a major mold problem within the walls of their department, and now they have filed a federal lawsuit. News 6's Eric Sandoval is the only reporter to speak with them. So, Eric, what did they say happened?
Well, you mentioned they were high-ranking police officers with this department. This is the former deputy chief and the captain of Wildwood Police Department. They tell us they were accused of stealing when they took mold samples from their office walls.
Toxic, dangerous mold, that's what one family is dealing with at their apartment complex.
Well, we reported black mold inside of our apartment, and then we were evicted.
With issues of black mold, overgrown with black mold.
And turning now to a family grasping for fresh air through the midst of black mold.
And Fort Bend ISD is temporarily shutting down one of its schools after mold was detected on campus.
Last night, we showed you just how mold seems to be taking over a Provo apartment complex, making some of the renters there sick.
She found what appears to be mold in her family's apartment.
Toxic levels of mold in their dorm room.
The presence of mold in the buildings. In some cases, this is delaying the start of the school year. I told you about a Valley mom who says her child suffered because of black mold in her apartment.
Family is forced out of their home after discovering black mold.
His homes overrun with black mold. You can't live in them, you can't sell them. And getting rid of the mold can cost you thousands of dollars, but can you try?
Studies show exposure to indoor mold is linked to
finding
mental
dangerous
and physical
mold
health
inside,
problems in both
such as
adults
the
and
Roderick
children.
Ireland Courthouse and South Hadley High School, which have both since opened their doors.
Some residents
Toxic mold can grow and spread throughout homes. Left unchecked, it can create a disaster of its own. Here's CNBC's Contessa Brewer.
A walk in the park is a blessing for the Bear family, who survived a house of horrors.
I started getting migraines that I didn't understand. And if I look back, I was telling doctors, I feel like I've been hit by a truck.
Christina Bear, an attorney, says she felt all kinds of weird symptoms over the last few years. Rashes, dizziness, forgetfulness.
I wasn't super sympathetic. I sort of said, hey, we run hard, we have careers, we have young kids at home. Just deal with it, which was not a great response.
But then Christina fainted, and doctors found a tumor. Their children were having tantrums, mood swings, and even developmental delays. Teachers began asking questions about an autism diagnosis for their youngest son.
He was melting down for at least an hour a day, every day.
The Bears consulted so many doctors and therapists and experts looking for answers.
When we started getting these test results back, just the light bulb was going off that, oh, we're all in this house that is making us sick and literally was killing me.
Doctors concluded the Bear family was suffering devastating effects of toxic mold, made even worse during the pandemic, working and studying at home.
The entire time that the Bears lived here, due to improper flashing around the chimney stack, and so it was leaking water into the wall that no one could see.
Experts determined improper construction and a faulty roof repair on the Bears' Austin home led to moisture in the house. That fed the poisonous mold, spores blowing through their vents. After those mold tests, the Bears immediately fled this house, little knowing the financial hell they were about to enter. So far, mold has cost them $1 million and counting.
Almost none of those things are covered by insurance.
And every year, thousands of Americans find out they're living with toxic mold, often the exposure making them very sick. Experts find it in public housing, in schools, and even in the homes provided to military families.
There's no documented safe amount of mold. What is clear is all of these health consequences seem to be an interaction between molds and other things that grow after water damage.
The Bears feel fortunate they had the money to move and to get treatment, though it has cost them their life savings. And it could take the rest of their lives to recover physically from years of mold exposure.
And so the long-term question that all 6 of us have to wrestle with is, given that we were in this house exposed to this for 8 years, for the twins for their entire lives, what is the long-term impact on our brain? And we just don't know.
All you have to do is look at the outside of the Wildwood Police Department and you can see mold growing up the side of the building. But the former deputy chief and a captain here say the problem grew inside too.
We'd moved furniture and everything behind it was blackened. It became an unsafe work environment for us and the employees.
Tonight, Gerard Olbeck and Ashley Rogers have filed a federal lawsuit against the city of Wildwood. In the suit, they claim the city manager refused to address a health issue, even after fire hit the department last October.
You got to make sure that these employees at least get tested for the mold and asbestos. And he said, we're not talking about that. I said, huh? He goes, and don't use the M word.
Olbeck says he and Rogers decided to take their own samples of the mold inside. And they both say they were threatened with criminal charges for doing it.
The most absurd thing to me was that it was actually being investigated by the sheriff's office. I couldn't even wrap my head around that. If I didn't resign, they would put me in jail. And they made that very clear.
Both men say they resigned to avoid arrest and to keep their pensions.
These men and women have dedicated their lives to taking care of other people, as have I. And, you know, that's your people.
I don't know what to do.
As a retired Marine and Navy wife, Kimberly Purcell learned the importance of organization. She had no idea those skills would be used so much over the last year.
The houses don't get fixed.
14 binders documenting a 4-month horror that started last May when the family got orders to head to JEB Little Creek Fort Story.
Honestly, we were kind of in a panic of we need a place for our kids. We have 5 kids.
The Purcells were given this home on base, managed by Lincoln Military Housing. They say things weren't right from the moment they arrived.
The smell, so it kind of hits you as the door opens.
The house had new carpet and fresh paint, but that musty stench just continued to linger.
Terrifying. I prayed over my children every night that they wouldn't breathe in. I wrote over 100 maintenance requests, essentially pleading that they fix this place. We didn't find out till later that all these symptoms could be related to the mold.
Kim Purcell says the mold was everywhere she looked.
And asking Lincoln Military Housing to test, and they refused to.
In October, the Purcells had enough. They moved out, leaving everything in their home behind.
It's a big loss.
The family had a private company test for mold. The results were shocking.
Stachybotrys, which is the one that everybody, considers black mold, but it's not the only bad mold.
The EPA tests for 36 different types of mold. 31 were found in the house.
Tomorrow we are going to go talk to Senator Mark Warner up in D.C. What would you like me to ask him?
Our families should not be put through this. This is not something we asked for. We send our loved ones off to protect our country. But when we ask our country to give us a safe place to live, there's nothing they can do for us.
When you see that, what's that like for you seeing?
Well, what I've been seeing is this isn't right.
Once a vision of future living, the Kingswood estate, built in 1950, was one of the first council estates of its kind. But time has taken its toll on these blocks, and 70 years later, many of them are beginning to look their age. There is now widespread damp and toxic black mold in many of these 750 homes. Families here say that the landlord has left them living in slum-like Dickensian conditions.
The repairs were not repairs, and nobody seemed to pick up on it.
Not just cracks in the walls, but a deeper, more threatening problem caused by damp.
Some say it's already taken a major toll on their health.
About 15 or whatever years, me and my wife has lived in the kitchen because of the mould, yeah.
For 78-year-old Brian Joyce, breathing is a task that makes everyday life a challenge. It's something he now connects directly to the poisonous air inside his home. Where the mould became so widespread, he and his wife Rita had no choice but to spend most of their waking hours here in the kitchen.
We've got mould in the cupboards. The mould's everywhere now, basically.
They raised a family in this home. Lifelong happy memories tainted by mould and damp.
This is our bedroom, or was our bedroom.
Letters of complaint to Southwark Council, which Brian says, for years, simply fell on deaf ears.
Year after year, for the environmental health officer, and ignored.
And here on the Kingswood estate, he's not the only one.
I've told my son not to come in here because he's got asthma problem. Really angry. One, you pay rent, you pay your council tax, expecting if there's a problem, it will be dealt with, and then it's not being dealt with. Disappointed that nobody's listening, they're not doing anything about it.
There are dozens of mothers and fathers just like Marta here, worried about the effect the mould is having on their children's health. Brian and his wife both impacted by the air inside. Rita's breathlessness meant she had to use a wheelchair.
It just got worse and worse.
Brian's desperation led him to invite 3 separate GPs to examine the conditions inside his home. 3 visits and accompanying letters in 2015, 2017 and early last year.
This is written from your doctor to the council 4 years ago, and nothing has changed.
No.
Complaints written by doctors to the council calling for action to be taken immediately.
I've lived here for 5 years now, and for the last 4 years we've been having a problem with the fumes.
400 yards down the road is George, forced to call in the experts to prove to his landlord, the council, that conditions inside his home are damaging his children's health. He's chosen to remain anonymous for fear of reprisals.
It's affecting my family quite a lot.
This family have more than just the damp to contend with. George says he, his wife and their 2 small children live in the same block as a drug dealer, that the fumes from a makeshift lab enter their home.
Our child in here slept here for a week, and every night she would cough, vomit and sneeze throughout the night. We packed up everything, took our child into the bedroom where we all sleep.
You all sleep in here?
We all sleep in there.
Packed into one small room at night, George says his complaints have been dismissed.
They told me that it's just in my head, it's killing me. I go to sleep with this mask all night. If I don't, then in the morning, I'll be very ill. Chest pains, I'll be feeling like drunk, dizzy, and feeling
that's been
drunk.
For 4 years?
For 4 years. 4 years. No one can stand this. It wears you down. It's affected our life completely.
In 2018, George paid for a survey by an independent air quality expert who discovered the family was breathing air that could pose serious health problems. Roger Martin is the man who carried out that test 2 years ago.
I'm astonished that 2 years later that nothing seems to have been done. The problem, as identified by us, hasn't been explored further. To see something of this nature appear in somebody's flat whilst everybody's asleep at 3:30 in the morning is certainly extremely unusual.
And dangerous?
Potentially very dangerous. It could easily be associated with some illicit laboratory activities.
Southwark Council says to date no evidence of wrongdoing has been found. However, we remain in contact with the resident and will continue to work with them to investigate any further issues and to take the appropriate action if evidence of drug-related activity is found. Southwark has the largest proportion of social housing across all London boroughs, around 35,000 council homes to look after. The 750 here on the Kingswood estate, on the southern outskirts of Southwark, are a drop in the ocean for one of the country's biggest local authorities.
In the living room here.
Back at Brian's, he and his wife, like George, commissioned an expert to carry out a test. The results were shocking. Very high level of mould colonies present.
Yeah.
This confirms the area sample is heavily contaminated. Medical experts say mould spores in the volumes discovered in Brian's home cause serious respiratory infections. Prolonged exposure is particularly harmful.
The Southwark government has obviously got the intelligence to know that mould causes respiratory problems and just ignored it basically.
Brian's wife was eventually admitted to hospital. Whilst there, the consultant wrote to the council imploring it to take action.
She has a mould problem in the house which the council have not been able to deal with due to the lack of public funding, and her health needs having restrictive lung disease.
Rita's breathing problems never improved, and sadly 18 months ago she died. Do you think if this mould and damp hadn't been around for so long, your wife
Would still be alive? I believe it, I really believe it. I said to him, I want the cause of my wife's death investigated.
In response, Southwark Council has said we've been offering Mr Joyce a full package of works to address all the problems in his flat for some time, as well as the removal of all mould. Any suggestion that we have not is not true. Unfortunately, to date, he's declined to give the council access. We have set aside £32 million for our next round of major improvements to the Kingswood estate. As is normal for an estate of its age, a range of work is now needed to maintain the buildings, including to address damp issues. We had planned to start last year, but residents asked us to look again at whether the external wall insulation our surveyors have recommended is right for the estate. In response, we've brought in an independent expert to look at this with residents.
I've got her up there to talk to her, you know. No, she's not there. I'm not going off my head or anything, but what do you say? When the main thing in life goes out of your life, where are you, you know?
He moved in his prime, and for 40 years has been blighted by damp and mould. Now towards the end of his life, Brian feels enormously let down by his landlord. The only question for many who live inside these homes is what comes next.
So obviously this is my bedroom. As you can see, this is where I don't want to sleep with all the damp.
In Newquay, 37-year-old Julie Roberts is no longer able to wash the mould off the ceilings and the walls she's privately rented for 7 years.
Last year I was diagnosed with lung cancer, brain, liver. Last week I was diagnosed with on my bladder and half my lungs collapsed now.
Julie last complained to her landlord 5 months ago, but nothing has happened. She now doesn't know how long she has left, but knows she doesn't want to spend a second more of it in this.
Because it upsets me. All I want is just, you know, someone just to say, you know, just come out and say it's not condensation. You know, and no, that's all of us get is condensation. And yeah.
The property manager, Mears, told us they guarantee repairs will be completed as quickly as possible and have offered Julie alternative accommodation until it's finished. But for every home being fixed, there are many more, housing many families forced to live in disrepair and the despair that so often comes with it.
When Sarah Melton headed off to the University of Oklahoma as any incoming college freshman,
all I could think about really was
she had a lot on her mind.
Finally being independent and moving away from home. I was very nervous.
But it's what never crossed her mind.
Never in my life, no.
That caused the 18-year-old Frisco student to become so sick, she was forced to drop out.
It's still to this day, it's hard to really accept all of it.
Sarah says within days of moving into her dorm, the symptoms began.
I had no voice, I was congested, had headaches constantly.
At first, Sarah and her parents chalked it up to adjusting to dorm life.
I just thought it was like, the petri dish of the dorm.
But her symptoms got worse.
It got much worse.
She started noticing hand tremors, memory loss, a personality change. This straight-A student was now failing her classes, no matter how much she studied.
I would call my mom and text my mom and tell her that I was going crazy because I thought I was literally losing my mind.
Sarah's mom told her she needed to come home for the weekend, and it was as she was packing up that she looked up.
It was all over the ceiling.
And there it was.
Everywhere over the ceiling.
Tests revealed Sarah's symptoms were the result of mold toxicity. And even though it's been 9 months since she's been in her dorm, Sarah still feels the effects.
The main issues are with my memory. I'm still very forgetful. I'm not myself. And it's hard to look in the mirror every day and see a completely different person.
Sarah Melton wants it to be on every college student's radar, which is why she started a Facebook page where dozens of students have shared their stories, warning others to be on the lookout.
You're supposed to go to college and learn and make friends and have fun and, get ready for the rest of your life, and nobody should have to put that on hold because of something so preventable.
They come for me like I'm the problem. I'm not the problem.
Across the way, Banisha King invited us into her apartment. She's dealing with her own list of problems in her unit.
I've been going through mold, rats, and leakage.
She showed us around her place and the new car seat that is now covered with mold. Almost every room is adorned with an air freshener and fly trap.
I use this for the mold smell. It's on low now, but if I bring it up, but this is what make my house smell good from the mold.
While we were interviewing both of these ladies, this man showed up, not too happy to see us.
Are you a manager of the property?
Go. I'm one of the supervisors. You gotta go.
Fantastic. What's your name?
You gotta go.
What's your
Thank
name?
You guys gotta go.
Do you have a name?
You gotta go.
Are you with this property?
You gotta go. You guys have to leave.
These residents have been showing us mold
Awesome.
and
You guys
problems
gotta go.
here.
You guys gotta go.
Have you spoken with them?
You guys need to go.
Have you addressed any of this?
You guys need to go.
How long have you been here?
I don't have any permission to be here.
We've been invited.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Call the Tampa Police Department.
Wonderful.
You guys are going to be trespassed if you guys refuse to leave.
Can you give us any information?
You guys need to go.
New tonight, multiple families claiming their children have fallen ill due to a mold issue in ASU dorms.
ASU saying that is not the case. ABC 15's Luzdelia Caballero spent months looking into students' and parents' concerns and spoke with experts about the results of multiple lab tests, all new at 10.
We spoke to a mom and dad who say their child, who goes to ASU, has been under specialist care for months, and they believe it stems from mold issues in the dorms they say ASU did not take care of. So they hired their own inspector to go in and take a look.
I was like, oh my God, that's all inside of the vent.
These parents who don't want to share their names reacting to pictures their daughter sent them taken, they say, inside her ASU dorm room.
And I was like, what? I mean, I was completely in shock.
They tell us their child moved into a room in ASU's Palo Verde West dorm in August. Weeks later, they say she fell ill.
Lethargic, headaches, lost her voice for like 2.5 weeks.
They say she also experienced severe eye irritation. Dr. Cherie Dursum, an integrative and functional medicine physician at Integrative Medicine of Arizona, says that can be a symptom of toxic mold exposure.
We can see vision affected where it's really a differentiation between shades of gray. So they'll describe kind of blurry vision.
Her eyes were just where the whites should be, it looked like it was almost blood.
That's a common symptom, yes.
Dr. Dursum didn't treat any of the students in this case, but says mold exposure falls in the realm of possibilities, listing the following symptoms.
We see GI issues, certainly respiratory, chronic sinus issues,
swelling, rashes, fatigue, sleep disturbances. It could be hair loss, or they get a headache, or sometimes they even get a tingling sensation, or they become anxious.
These parents telling ABC 15 their daughter experienced the majority of these symptoms. So in October, they sent their child petri dishes to collect samples from the vents and walls of her dorm.
And within just a couple days, they were black. And I said, this is a much bigger problem than we originally thought.
That's when they say they alerted the school to mold concerns in their child's dorm. Thinking their child wasn't alone, they also say they took to social media asking if any ASU parents had similar experiences.
We have over 100 parents that have shared stories with situations much worse than what we've experienced.
ABC 15 was able to contact more than a dozen of those families, sharing similar stories about students with health issues, many not wanting to go on the record, but one other parent wanting to remain anonymous did speak with us. They told us their child's symptoms got so bad when living in the Vista del Sol dorms, they decided to get their urine tested.
That's the most valid way to test for mold.
ABC 15 presenting the results of that November urine test from Real-Time Laboratories to Dr. Dursum.
They only test for toxic molds. That's what this test is. None of these are good molds. So you don't really want anything on here, but if it's lower than the criteria, then possibly we don't need to treat, but definitely these are all over the minimum amount.
The urine test the parents shared from November showed toxic molds were found across the board.
We have ochratoxin, aflatoxin. Those are both from aspergillus that grows in the walls of water damaged buildings.
Ochratoxin coming in double what's needed to be considered present in a sample. The trichothecene group almost 4 times the amount needed, and gliotoxin nearly 3 times over.
And you as a physician, if you're looking at this and this is your patient that comes back with these results, would you be concerned?
I would, yes. I would treat the patient.
Meanwhile, these parents do admit that ASU sent a crew to their daughter's dorm in Palo Verde West in November to test for mold and clean affected areas. ASU told ABC 15 at the time, in part, in response to mold and air quality concerns raised by students and their parents, ASU has hired a firm specializing in mold and indoor air quality to conduct mold air sampling in numerous residential halls. If the sampling indicates a problem, ASU will immediately begin remediation. These parents saying their daughter only seemed to be getting worse.
I said, this is crazy. What is ASU doing about this? And to be honest with you, they're not doing much.
So they tell ABC 15 they hired a company to come out to the dorms and do additional testing after ASU's tests were done in November. The CEO of Dwell Inspect Arizona confirming with ABC 15 over the phone he personally gathered those samples from the students' dorm room, air vent, and bathroom.
That seems to be the most common place that patients find mold.
Those samples taken to a company called EMSL Analytical. The company wouldn't analyze the results for us, but we did get their expanded fungal report. The tests finding 16 substances in all, some of them which Dursum says can be toxic, like aspergillus, penicillium, catonium, and cladosporium.
Many of the toxic molds are on here. Catonium is not a good one to have. The cladosporium, not great, but it's not as toxic as some.
We also took the results to another expert.
What they're saying in plain English is there's evidence of actual growth.
Michael Schrantz is an indoor environmental professional and owner of Environmental Analytics, who helped us break down what these results mean.
So this is not about quantifying exposure, it's about IDing a source.
We asked about the categories listed next to the molds in the EMSL report. You see some potentially toxic molds like cladosporium listed as high, while others like aspergillus, penicillium, and catonium listed as rare.
You'll see that there's an asterisk next to a few of the quantities, the 2 high and the 1 rare. These samples show us there's evidence of actual growth, that this just isn't normal settling of background fungal structures.
ASU says mold readings their tests found in November were within normal and safe levels, sending ABC 15 a statement in February with some more detail about their inspection, saying they hired a firm that conducted environmental air quality assessments on November 12th and November 15th. ASU's findings: there were no water or moisture sources or water damage observed during the inspection. There was some dirt and dust buildup on the air vents in some of the sampled rooms. There was no visible fungal growth observed during the inspection. The results for total airborne fungal spore concentrations did not indicate the presence of indoor sources of fungi. We took the school statement to Schrantz along with the EMSL report commissioned by the family, which is dated November 17th.
The clear elephant in the room is one of discrepancy. Mold doesn't grow that quickly to go from nothing to everything. That means there was enough moisture and enough nutrients wherever they sampled for mold to grow.
We wanted to know more about what Schrantz called discrepancies. There's a presence of growing mold in one report commissioned by the family, and ASU's claim that their tests in November did not indicate the presence of indoor sources of fungi. Then there are the pictures from the family and ASU's statement saying its November inspection did not find water damage or visible fungal growth.
Why do you think ASU's test results were different than what EMSL's lab results showed?
It can easily be attributed to they were looking at different areas. We also know that we're limited to the experience and knowledge of the inspectors.
Then there's this. The family says when their daughter returned home from Christmas break, her symptoms improved. Dr. Dursum says that is also telling.
That cues me into think that maybe there's mold.
At this point, these parents are asking for more tests to be done.
The contrast is too much. I think we need to get kind of a neutral third party out there to take a deeper dive, because clearly you have two different outfits claiming almost the opposite.
Tests they hope can, at the very least, clarify the discrepancies Schrantz points to.
Do that for the kids.
Colette Biggs has been experiencing health issues since before she was 2 years old, suffering from consistent migraines, nausea, fevers, aches, and even developing cognitive issues. Doctors over the years could not figure out what was wrong with her, testing her for many diseases and illnesses without any significant results.
They basically say the tests all come back normal. It's been very frustrating because even though the tests say things are normal, if you live with her, you know that something's not right. You know your child when she's sick.
It was just last year when a specialist discovered that she was suffering from toxic mold exposure.
None of the doctors that we had seen until we met with Dr. Eunice had ever mentioned a possible exposure to toxic mold. And to our knowledge, we have not been able to see mold in our home.
After tests came back with extreme results of mold and spores in their home, the Biggs were forced to move out.
When I was in the house, I used to get headaches every single day, and I usually couldn't leave the house because I was so sick.
The Biggs are now living in temporary housing while Colette is experiencing detox treatments to rid her body of the mold. Now that the Biggs are out of this house, Colette's health conditions have begun to improve, and she is hopeful for the future.
I'm definitely a lot more positive going through the day, just knowing that I'm on the road to getting better and that I will get better.
While the Biggs are taking solace in the fact their daughter's health is improving, they've run into yet another issue. Their home cannot be remediated, they can no longer live in it or sell it, and they still have a mortgage left on the home. They will be forced to demolish the home and eventually plan to rebuild on the land.
None of that stuff is really important. What's important is her health, our health, and our family.
I would just be devastated if I picked up the paper one day and read that somebody in 113, that's the unit number, had 2 or 3 kids and one passed away.
A Fargo man has had enough. He contacted our whistleblower hotline saying that his living conditions are terrible, and he tells us his landlord has done nothing to help. The man, along with his girlfriend, say they are living in an apartment filled with toxic mold, and they claim the conditions are costing them a lot of money in medical bills. Valley News Team's Joseph Ojo spoke with the man about the mold issues he is dealing with and shares why this man does not want this story to fall on deaf ears.
Kevin Story has lived in his apartment for over 2 years, but he says when it rained on June 3rd, his apartment had become far from the safe haven he once believed it was.
Burning throat, ears, coughing, congestion, drainage, sick to the stomach, sometimes a little more.
Those symptoms are from what he says is the toxic mold that has plagued his apartment. I was able to witness it firsthand, and during our interview, I had to step out for some fresh air.
They're not clean and they got mold in them. There's nothing you can do. Basically, when we leave here, we have to throw just about everything away.
And Story isn't exaggerating about throwing everything away. He tells us the mold has eaten away at expensive pieces of art, and he says beneath his carpet is filled with mold, and many of his personal property, like clothes and furniture, are all damaged.
We have the right to a habitable place, a place that the carpeting doesn't get wet every few days, safe, healthy. It's not.
So Story went to his landlord, and he says the landlord told him he was the reason for the mold. Now Story is still in that apartment, and he tells us his landlord says he has to stay there until his lease is up.
Get out of here and get well. And hopefully it doesn't take too long. That's what we want.
Story says even if he finds a new place, the damage is already done. But now he wants others like college students and families with young kids to see his story on his apartment, number 113.
They're not going to remediate this. They're not going to take the mold out of the walls. They're not going to take the mold out of under the carpeting. They're not going to fix things. They're not going to fix the floor that's broken, that water gets through.
In Fargo, Joseph Ojo, Valley News Live.
So around here is particularly very bad.
Fabio knows that cycle well. When black mold started growing in his small studio flat 3 years ago, he eventually took legal action against his landlord, Kensington and Chelsea Council, who made repairs and paid compensation, but within a year, the mold had returned.
I feel like I'm talking to a wall all the time. We're the tenants, we're the ones who are living here. They're not living here. Yeah, we're the ones who have to feel safe, who have to feel happy in their surroundings.
Kensington and Chelsea Council say there have been cases of damp in the tower block following the removal of external cladding, and work has begun to resolve these issues. They say they've been working with Fabio's solicitor to attempt to gain access to the property for some time, which he disputes. The council says everyone deserves to live in a safe, healthy home. But for some, they're losing hope of that ever happening.
Water leaking from the ceiling of Jessica Smith's apartment.
There's absolutely no way that there's not mold in this house.
She's in her car because she's afraid to go inside. It's all over the place. Remove these cabinets and this is what you get. Water damage. That black stuff.
There is some type of mold there, it looks like, yeah.
Mold, mildew, or anything of the sorts, the bacteria that comes with it could potentially kill my child.
In and out of the hospital since birth. Lyndon Mitchell's immune system is compromised.
The longest he spent outside of the hospital is 45 days.
When out of the hospital, his home, Greers Grove Road at the North Cross Townhomes, Section 1815, Unit B.
Well, the water was coming through the kitchen light fixtures. I reported that for years.
This privately owned complex receives checks each month from HUD, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, but tenants like Smith say it's not livable.
You can tell they don't care.
Smith says she's asked the landlord for her home to be remediated of mold or moved to a different unit.
They refuse to do it. They sprayed bleach on it, put sheetrock back up.
The thing is, bleach doesn't completely kill mold on drywall or wood. Smith gave Fox 46 Charlotte an audio recording of a maintenance worker trying to convince her otherwise.
I need to put the bleach on. Bleach kill the, no regular bleach. They got special bleach to kill the mold.
Smith says mold keeps coming back. Fox 46 Charlotte got results when Smith's landlord put her family up in this motel so it could remediate and test for mold.
The only reason they put me in the hotel and are opening my windows to air out the house and all that other stuff is because I flat out told them I was contacting the news.
But instead of giving Smith the results of the mold test, the landlord took these photos of her clothes on the ground, saying in a letter the house is not in sanitary conditions, threatening eviction. Fox 46 Charlotte made several attempts to talk with the landlord. Finally, we found her.
Charmin, we had spoken a few weeks ago. My name's David Santendra. I'm with Fox 46 Charlotte. We were just wondering why you guys are sending photos to Jessica Smith's apartment with their laundry on the ground instead of actually taking care of the mold problem. Can we talk to you at all about what's going on with Jessica's apartment? Are you concerned about their child's health?
That's the landlord telling Smith there's no mold, but guess what? After the landlord said it was all clear, Smith had it tested herself.
Where was it primarily?
every place I checked.
That's William Page with Page Inspections Plus Inc.
You know, it looks like it's been an ongoing thing.
Again, the scariest part is the health of this child. His doctor wrote this letter saying, "I recommend that the house be tested for mold and if found, have it removed promptly." Is that an environment that he can live in?
No.
Fox 46 Charlotte's investigation uncovers more negligence from the landlord. Play that back. They didn't even bother to test samples of the walls where mold was first seen.
That means they just don't know what they're talking about, because you still got the spores. You know, it can come through the walls.
They only tested the air.
Air test is probably one of the last things I would do.
The expert says it'll get worse.
And you can see all the moisture damage.
There are dozens of apartments in this complex. Smith says neighbors also have mold. North Cross is cashing in on a government program intended to help families in need.
Shortness of breath, respiratory failure.
Smith says they're just making it worse.
She knows about his health issues. I've repeatedly told her that you're potentially killing my child. And she takes nothing serious. She's rude. She belittles us. She talks to us like we're absolutely nothing because we live in government housing. It's not fair. It's not fair. My child didn't ask to be born into this, and he didn't ask to go through it.
Jess Laser moved to Florida from her dream life, or for her dream life. Great job living in paradise, but days after moving into her Largo apartment with her 2 little boys, she had to leave their new place and everything behind. Our I-Team investigator Jackie Calloway finds state and local laws do little to protect renters in these types of cases.
I wanted my boys to have a better life. I wanted them to have more than me.
Jess Laser moved to Florida to take a good-paying tech job and the dream of an easier life for her young sons.
I didn't have much growing up. I wanted them to have more.
Jess relocated to Somerset Apartments in Largo December 29th after she says management sent her a video of her unit.
One of the leasing agents did send me a video through iPhone, but it was the very small video.
She got sick days after moving in.
The puffy eyes, I was getting hives, really nasally congested.
And found what appeared to be black mold on the floors in the kitchen and bathroom.
Well, we were walking around on the floor and it was just black everywhere.
She complained to management and they removed the vinyl flooring. Then Jessica took these photos of the bare concrete in her apartment.
A lot of the problems that were experienced in this apartment were below what the eye can see.
Certified mold expert Michael Rubino says the photos appear to show mold covered much of the floor.
And anytime you have too much particulate that enters the body, you're going to feel some adverse health reactions.
3 weeks after moving in, Jessica's doctor wrote this letter stating that there was a correlation between black mold exposure and her asthma and headaches. 4 days later, property management notified Jess that their own tests found, quote, no health risk, but in an abundance of caution, we will have remediation for moisture performed.
They did say, well, we have a brand new, recently updated apartment. We can just move you in there. I was like, okay.
But Jess said the new unit was dirty, and she worried it may contain mold as well.
All right, so we have the same issue here.
At our request, Michael Rubino inspected that second unit.
Looks like mold to me, too.
He found black mold in the bathroom and bedroom and on some of the Laser family belongings.
Anything that's porous, like a fabric couch, for instance, cannot be effectively cleaned and unfortunately has to be discarded.
According to one study published in the National Institute of Health, molds can cause respiratory symptoms and asthma. Another research paper found a connection between prolonged indoor mold exposure and decreased cognitive development in children under age 6. Jess said she feared for her family's health. She left the second apartment and all of her potentially contaminated furniture and personal items.
I put all my money into this apartment.
The I-Team found there is little recourse for people in Jess's situation under both state and local laws.
Did you want me to give you her number, sir?
Pinellas County Code Enforcement's Division Manager Jude Reason says his office often fields mold complaints from tenants.
We don't have authority over that.
Many counties, including Pinellas, simply don't regulate mold issues.
We do not have an ordinance where we enforce mold specifically.
It's very discouraging to tenants in Florida.
And Martin Lawyer, who specializes in landlord-tenant issues with Bay Area Legal Services, says under Florida law, renters like Jess have only one legal remedy.
The only effective way to make a landlord fix any maintenance problem in Florida is to file a lawsuit.
The family has hired an attorney, but has not filed suit. I asked Somerset Apartments about her case. The complex's corporate office would only say, our attorney is working with Miss Laser's counsel to resolve this matter. What do you think the future looks like?
I don't know. I'm just trying to get through today.
Jessica recently sent the I-Team the results of air and surface mold testing she paid to have done by a certified mold inspection company. We asked Rubino to analyze those results. He says the tests confirm heavy toxic mold in both apartments.
And I'm like on the verge of having to quit my job because I put all my money into this apartment.
I'm I-Team investigator Jackie Calloway taking action for you.
Someone looking to hire a mold remediation business asked to see that they are licensed as a mold assessor or mold remediator by the Department of Business and Professional Regulation. We have a link to look up a contractor in this story right now on abcactionnews.com.
He didn't need the tools. He already knew it was there. The Lewis Korchik with Eagle Eye Home Inspection wanted to see the mold for himself.
Mold growing all over the back of the sheetrock, mold growing all over the wood that's down here is totally rotted away.
And we didn't know. Last week we introduced you to Danny Hogan and 6 other homeowners in Cape Coral.
It's actually dripping in my hands.
Worried that their houses are rotting away from the inside because of a defect that allowed water to seep through the stucco, windows, and weather barriers.
How much more proof do you need?
Today comes the proof. The test results show it's Stachybotrys, black mold. According to documents obtained by NBC2, this defect was uncovered at least 4 years ago in houses with second floors built by Beazer Homes throughout the area. The home builder spent $30 million fixing 279 homes in Florida.
It's a systemic problem.
Josh Burnett is an attorney specializing in home defects that lead to this issue.
Soaking wet.
We have homeowners who we represent who have had entire chunks of stucco falling off and dropping to the ground.
He says his firm has turned away hundreds of homeowners like Hogan, who no longer can sue the home builders under Florida law. Defect suits are limited to 10 years in Florida. In a statement, Beazer says, whenever a homeowner feels there may be a problem and it is timely submitted, we will inspect the home and make any needed repairs.
What ends up happening to the benefit of builders many times is time runs out.
Builders are not obligated to notify homeowners of the defect either. We asked Beazer Homes why they did not notify homeowners about the defect, but they did not answer our question. Engineers say it's hard to identify this issue in homes because it often takes 7 years or more for the damages to become visible.
It's a home that's supposed to last them their lifetime. What builders seem to be saying in a lot of instances is they're hopeful that it'll last long enough so those homeowners don't have claims.
We're now breathing it right now. So it's in the house.
For Danny Hogan, time has run out.
We have rotten wood with a house that's eventually going to fall down.
His claim to Beazer Homes to have it fixed was denied.
I've tried contacting them and they won't even respond or give me a call back.
At this point, Hogan would have to pay if he wants the problem fixed. But Korchik says time is not on his side.
Any type of mold that's found in higher levels can affect everybody's health differently.
For these homeowners, they're trying to find any legal action they can to get their homes repaired, not at their cost. We've posted more about homeowners' laws and what to pay attention to avoid the situation on our website, NBC-2.com. Live in the studio, David Hodges, NBC2.
William Johnson lives at the park at Lavanzo off Beach Boulevard. He reached out to me for help, saying that his complaints about a blackish substance growing up the sides of his windows and along the windowsill have gone unanswered.
I discovered it pretty much thinking that it was the air conditioner. So I opened the window. Once I opened the window, I noticed that black mold everywhere.
Johnson says his first job as a dad is protecting his family. He says that he took his concerns to the management and was told he had to prove this was mold.
On the other side, you can still see where it was similar to here, but I can't get to that.
Johnson paid more than $100 for that lab test, and he told me it confirmed his suspicions. I went to the management for answers. After all, the signs outside say that they manage with care and integrity. No. But I just have a question for you about a tenant.
No.
So you're not going to answer any questions for me?
I can't. I'm sorry.
Can you give me information? The manager, Rhonda, agreed to talk with me, but without my photographer. She's new to the job, but familiar with Johnson's case. As a grandmother herself, she told me that she wants to protect his kids, too. Rhonda made 3 promises to me: to cover the cost of the lab test, bring in experts to confirm the findings and figure out how to fix it, and to move Johnson and his family to another unit until the work is done. It was news this dad was happy to hear, even if it did take a call to Action News Jax.
Our health as a whole, it's kind of tough. But it's a lot better now because we actually cleaned it up some, but you can still tell.
Johnson tells me a specialist has come out since. I'll stay in touch with the complex to push to make sure these promises are kept. Consumer advocates say before you consider breaking a lease because of mold, talk to an attorney who specializes in mold issues so that you know your rights and how to exercise them. In the studio, Dawn Lopez, CBS 47 Action News Jax.
New at 10, a Tempe mother is dealing with a huge mold problem in her apartment. She says after months of trying to get management to deal with it, they asked her to move out instead of taking care of the mold.
So we brought a mold expert inside the apartment to get a look for ourselves. Team 12's Nyala Charles has the story.
When they opened this wall up, it was just filled completely with mold.
Jordan Downs was in disbelief when all of this mold was found inside her apartment walls in January. She submitted this request to management at Murrieta at ASU Apartments in Tempe, demanding her landlords to clear the problem up. Management marked the job as complete, but Downs said it was far from finished.
This wall was filled with mold. I could smell it, I could see it, and I just knew it was there.
She noticed her 3-year-old daughter was getting sick.
She's had a cough for several months, breathing problems.
Downs can't be sure it's from the mold yet, but she had her place environmentally tested by a professional a couple weeks ago. That report came back with high levels of toxic mold in the walls and air, recommending that the apartment be treated with full containment. Downs brought the report to apartment management and still,
I haven't heard back from them since.
12 News invited an additional mold expert, Russell Olinsky.
That's not good.
Olinsky says the mold is potentially toxic until additional testing is done to confirm.
UV light.
He says a water leak in the bathroom caused the mold. And that's what the city of Tempe found too. The city sent the landlords a citation to fix the leak in 2 weeks or face a fine.
If we are forced to stay here and pay rent, that we're going to continue to get sick.
We called and emailed Murrieta Apartments management multiple times. An employee said the manager was busy, but she never called back. However, management did send Downs this termination agreement, offering to let her out of the lease and threatening a fine if she makes public statements about the situation. Downs says she's not signing it. Attorney Tom Level says Arizona law does not specifically address mold, but does say landlords must provide a safe living space where a tenant can leave after 5 days without penalty.
Downside is, you have to find another place to go, and the current market is a little crowded right now.
From there, tenants can sue in civil court. That's something Downs is considering, and she's already decided not to live here.
I'm staying with family for now until we can find a new place.
Nyla Charles, 12 News.
In
Health Watch. One patient has died and 5 others are infected from dangerous mold found in Seattle's Children's Hospital. That's according to the Seattle Times. The medical center has been forced to close all of its main operating rooms as a result. The hospital says the rooms were infested by mold on and off for about a year, and it's likely due to deficiencies in air handling and purifying systems. About 1,000 surgeries have been postponed as a result, and more urgent procedures have been moved to other locations.
The parents of Cavani and Kalani are devastated and convinced that what caused their deaths is what's growing inside some of these apartments.
After my son died, I knew it was mold. I had a feeling it was still mold.
Shavante Melcher's baby boy Cavani was just 3 weeks old when he died in 2018. And 4 days ago, her baby girl Kalani died, just weeks away from her first birthday.
We just woke up and she was dead.
Mold had everything to do with this.
She had just started getting a runny nose, but no, she wasn't sick. She, just like my son, they seemed fine. They seem fine.
Shavante and the children's father, Tyrell White, believe mold is to blame. They live in Canterbury Estates in Inkster. The low-income federal housing is run by the Inkster Housing Commission. And this is the mold in their apartment. And this is mold in a vacant unit adjacent to theirs. 3 days ago, the couple hired Absolute Labs to test their home after Kalani died. And the lab reported high levels of a toxic mold called chatomium.
They have to be held accountable.
Today, community activists protested outside the Inkster Housing Commission because they say after Cavani died 2 years ago, all the executive director did was move the couple and their 2 older children to another unit in the same building.
I moved out the first apartment. They moved me to another one that was full with mold.
And this unbelievable site right next door.
The house is horrible, but in my house is above the refrigerator, it's in the bathroom, it's under the sink, cracks, it's in the foundation.
You go in there, you gonna cough like it's something wrong. I caught bronchitis on my first son's death.
And Paul Bollinger, the executive director of the Inkster Housing Commission, says he cannot comment beyond telling us that they are currently investigating the situation. In Inkster, Kimberly Craig, 7 Action News.
Well, 10 on your side got a lot of response after we investigated an extreme case of mold on the peninsula.
Lab results showed an apartment had indoor mold counts that were 36 times greater than what would be considered elevated. Investigative reporter Chris Horn found that mold is a way of life in every corner of Hampton Roads. Tonight, he is following up with how to make your case in court if mold shows up in your apartment. Chris?
Yes, Stephanie, a little legal advice from an expert tonight. Landlords have responsibilities, but so do tenants when it comes to mold. I got some advice on how to win a mold case in court from an attorney who fights for renters.
Attorney Jessica Klein says if you want to win a mold case in court, you can never have too much paper trail.
The first step a tenant should do is write a letter to their landlord or the property manager. They want to do that immediately, and you want to put it in writing. You want to have it dated and signed, and you want to keep a copy of that.
And don't forget, because that written notice is required under the statute, photographs are just as important. Klein says lab results like these can help too. But once the landlord is notified that mold even could be present, they have to take steps to investigate and correct the problem.
If there's a water leak that's creating the mold, then they would want to investigate where that water's coming from, cause the water to stop. It just depends on what the issue is.
If the landlord does not take corrective action, then the tenant can file one of these, a tenant's assertion and complaint. But the tenant cannot just stop paying rent.
And they can pay their rent into escrow. So the rent does continue to get paid. The tenant cannot withhold rent in Virginia.
In the end, a judge would decide who gets that escrowed rent, either the landlord or the tenant. In extreme cases, a tenant can win relocation, but Klein says those are rare, and judges look at each case on its own merits.
So what if you think that you not only have mold, but you believe that that mold is making you sick? Well, Klein says that's when it becomes a different kind of case, and you'll need a specialist, a personal injury lawyer. Chris Horn, 10 on your side.
They bought a beautiful home in Canton and started building their life together. They never imagined that something hidden inside this home would make one of them very sick. Crews are preparing to do work in Todd and Chelsea Gudith's home in Canton. Their goal, solving her health problems, which all started last fall, a while after her family turned on the furnace. It started with a rash.
Over a couple weeks, it spread across my whole body.
Doctors couldn't tell her why she had a rash, then a lingering sore throat, trouble breathing, joint pain, and even confusion.
The symptoms just kind of kept piling up, like one little symptom after the next. And by the time February came around, I was so miserable that I just didn't know what to do.
Finally, she went to a doctor who told her to contact Mold Pro. John Du Bois came to her house and did a test. He says he found high levels of, quote, toxic mold in her basement and crawl space. He says he hopes sharing her story doesn't just educate other homeowners, but doctors.
And there's a lot of good doctors in our area, in the whole Detroit area, Ann Arbor area, that deal in it, but traditional medicine does not really still accept mold as an issue. And quite honestly, I see it all day, 5 days a week.
Since the news came, Chelsea, her husband, and daughter have not stayed in the house. She says she's already physically feeling better. They're throwing away many of their belongings. Anything porous that can't handle the cleaning products has to go, and spending thousands of dollars to get rid of mold in their house.
Be aware that this happened to us and it really could happen to anybody. It's Michigan, it's humid, it's damp.
As for how this rare mold got in this house, John from Mold Pro says it's possible it came from a sewer problem that happened before they owned the house. As for more information on how you can protect your home, go to our website, wxyz.com. In Canton, Kim Russell, 7 Action News.
Kim, thank you.
While the root causes of mold, like standing water and leaky pipes, are code violations in the city, mold itself is not specifically listed, so inspectors don't test for it. They only do a visual inspection, and that's what this city resident and a leading mold lawyer are trying to fix. On Kevin Lanier's front door, a sign he bought when he first moved in 23 years ago.
It's a Maya Angelou quote, and it says, "Home can heal, and there's healing in the home." And unfortunately, this home is not healing me. It's actually made things worse.
For the last 10 months, his home has been making him sick.
I actually wear this mask at the suggestion of the medical advisors that who's been treating me.
The problem started at Courtyard Apartments in Baltimore early last year in the unit below him.
Fungal growth is evident. See lab reports.
That family showed attorney Neil Bixler air testing, which found high levels of unhealthy mold in their apartment from water damage.
Well, his daughter got really sick, had to be hospitalized. And yeah, they just moved out because they were getting sick.
The landlord, Fairfax Station Enterprises, let the family out of their lease early and gave them their security deposit back. A Baltimore City housing inspector later found the violations were fixed. 6 months later, Lanier's asthma really starts acting up. The landlord gave him an air purifier, but nothing helped. So he hired an independent company to test the air in his apartment. The results? High levels of mold.
It was alarming. After being determined that I was tested positive for mold allergies, I didn't know exactly what to do. I was stunned because I didn't know exactly what my next course of action was.
Then in May of this year, Lanier found more mold in the basement laundry room.
When you look at my photographs, you clearly see that there is mold present.
An inspector found the appearance of mold and water damage and issued a violation. The city says it was fixed a month and a half later.
There's no way of knowing if it was done properly.
That's because there's no requirement in the city or even surrounding counties to test the air for mold. What is required is a visual inspection to ensure the area is clean, dry, and undamaged.
Completely ignoring the fact that mold spores, by definition, are microscopic. You cannot see them with the naked eye unless you have a lot of active mold growth.
He's fighting for more protections for renters, like adding mold testing to city inspections.
Does it add a little bit to the cost? Yes. But considering the savings dealing with health impacts, it's well worth it.
It's something the Baltimore City Council will soon consider, holding an informational hearing about mold.
Is the good that can be gained from the regulation
going to be worth the trouble and expense of imposing the regulation on the people who didn't need it.
It's not that expensive, and it's more expensive not to do the right thing in the long run.
Bixler's now working to get Lanier compensation for medical bills and months of missed time at work. They're in mediation with Fairfax Station Enterprises through the Attorney General's office. The landlord's lawyer offered Lanier $1,000 and a 30-day release if he waived his future legal rights. Lanier declined. Then, in early October, Lanier gets a knock on the door. The landlord hired an independent company to test the air quality of his apartment and the basement. A bit of progress for Lanier's case, but more than the compensation, he wants to make sure no one else falls victim to this.
Until, you get these guidelines put into practice.
Do you want a hamburger for lunch?
Another busy morning in this Fayette County home. Even more hectic when you realize their home sits in the driveway of the house they actually bought.
So every morning you get up in your RV and look out the window at the house where you want to sleep.
It breaks my heart.
They say it's not just that they can't sleep here, they can barely walk through the front door without doing this.
You got the professional kind, don't you?
Oh, yes. Hold your nose.
I can't hold my nose.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Ooh, I can smell it. Did it smell this bad when you moved in?
No, not at all.
When Shelley and David Hopaw bought this Sonoya house in May, it looked like this. The listing gushed with attractive details. This beautiful home has just been renovated. Brand new paint, new floors, new fixtures, new countertops. Then David decided to replace the kitchen cabinets because they were too dark for Shelley. That decision would reveal the truth.
When my husband took it off, it just was hideous. It was terrible.
Mold hidden by a piece of plywood stained to match the cabinets. Then,
during the process of taking the cabinets out, the linoleum ripped.
So they decided to replace the kitchen floor. More mold underneath. And it smelled
wet, just like something had died in our house. I mean, it was just bad, and it just kept getting stronger and stronger.
They tore off some of the drywall, more mold, and then this.
Oh yeah, look at all that termite damage here. Good grief. And this is wet too, at least it was. So this is a brand new screw that they put into a piece of 2x4 that clearly should have been replaced because of termite damage.
The Fox 5i team talked to the head of the company that provides water service to this neighborhood. He confirmed the previous owner had repeated water pipe leaks throughout the house before the bank ultimately foreclosed. That bank sold the property to an Atlanta firm called Jar House, a boutique real estate brokerage firm that buys an average of 75 properties each month, fixes them up, and resells them. According to sales records, Jar House paid $76,000 for this house. It sold it to the Hopaws for $189,900.
As soon as I leave you, I'm going to go take a shower because the smell gets in your clothes and it doesn't go away.
Their young son is now being treated for a mysterious foot injury. His family believes it was caused by him running barefoot throughout the house. Tests revealed 10 different molds growing inside, including 3 toxic forms.
It really breaks my heart because we were looking forward to a dream home. And maybe it's not everybody's dream home, but it's our dream home. Sorry.
We reached out to Jar House owner Zare Najarian to explain how they sold a house with so much hidden damage. We got a response back from their attorney saying, "We are investigating. We're terribly sorry that the Hopaw's son is suffering," the statement read. The company pointed out the Hopaws bought the house as is, and we encourage potential purchasers to hire an inspector to evaluate the condition of the home.
Even when you sell a home to someone as is, you're not allowed to conceal known latent defects, and the inspector wasn't able to find this mold or termite damage. And the only way he would have been to have been ripping out walls, ripping out cabinets, and inspectors just don't do that.
Attorney Jason Crawford sent Jar House a letter asking them to buy back the house. When the deadline passed with no agreement, they sued, accusing Jar House of concealing the damage.
So in your mind, there's no doubt that someone intentionally tried to cover all this up?
I do not have any doubt.
Jar House has not responded yet to the lawsuit or our questions about it. For now, this family continues to pay the mortgage on a house that's not their home, instead living in their driveway, just out of range of the smell.
Well, take that, and I love you. And I'll see you later.
Well, according to their lawsuit, their son already had a compromised immune system before they bought this house, so they want someone to be paying his medical bills as well.
As a veteran, I feel that this company is taking advantage of us.
Claims of mold in military housing. It's a topic that Team 10 has been looking into for the past year. And tonight, a new case. Good evening. I'm Kimberly Hunt.
And I'm Steve Atkinson. That veteran says that she was exposed to toxic mold. She tells our Team 10 investigator Adam Rakusin the experience left her sick, unable to work, and eventually homeless.
For Victoria Phipps, a career in the military wasn't just a calling. It was a family affair.
My dad was in the Army. He's a Vietnam vet, and that just sparked my interest.
After graduating from college, Victoria decided it was time to serve her country. She spent 9 years in the Army.
I spent 5 years as a commanding officer, and then I medically retired out of the Army after that.
Victoria's lawyers say her separation was due to medical issues. After retiring, Victoria ended up at Camp Pendleton. She says the military offered veterans on-base housing through the government contractor Lincoln Military Housing. Victoria says about a month in, that's around March of last year, things with her health started to seem off.
The first doctor's appointment that I had with the VA, I remember telling her about, a really bad earache and neck pain that I couldn't really place.
Victoria says despite frequent doctor's appointments, her health kept getting worse. Fast forward to November 2020. Victoria says she complained to management about a rodent problem. She says a pest control specialist who was in her apartment to check things out found something different.
When he pulled out the stove, there was a rusted spot on the stove along with a patch of mold, as well as a large patch of mold on the cabinet adjacent to the stove.
Victoria filed a lawsuit against 2 of Lincoln Military Housing's subsidiary companies. The lawsuit asks for money for medical costs, loss of earning capacity, and attorney's fees, among other things. The lawsuit claims there was a severe and unacceptable mold problem that developed as a result of Lincoln Military Housing's conduct or lack thereof. The lawsuit says after being notified of the mold, a Lincoln Military Housing maintenance employee used a tool to measure moisture on the cabinet and floor where it was found. The lawsuit claims that worker told Victoria the moisture level was very high and that the cause was a previous leak in the apartment. It says that worker told Victoria there was a big leak that occurred in that apartment before she moved in.
There was some kind of leak in the property that shared a wall with Miss Phipps' property, and this leak caused a significant water intrusion issue in this shared wall, as well as the buildup and development of some black mold.
Christian Clark is one of Victoria's lawyers. According to the lawsuit, Victoria suffered damage to her respiratory system, pain, anxiety, and medical expenses. He says she struggled to work and ended up with no job and no place to live.
The emotional distress, the pain and suffering that you can imagine someone would have when their life is turned upside down in this way.
A spokesperson for Lincoln Military Housing told ABC 10 News, due to privacy and pending litigation, they can't go into specifics regarding the circumstances of individual residents. In a statement, a spokesperson said in part, "We treat all reports of water intrusion or mold as an emergency request, and we thoroughly investigate all resident concerns, including those related to water intrusion or mold, to ensure that they are immediately and appropriately addressed." In court filings, Lincoln Military Housing denied the allegations and explained how they relocated Victoria to a temporary housing unit. They've also fought back, filing their own lawsuit against Victoria, claiming in part she intentionally misrepresented to employees as well as tenants at the location she was being kicked out of base housing, and the leased property was contaminated with black mold. In court documents, they called the veteran's behavior reprehensible and despicable, claiming that she did damage to their reputation in the community and at Camp Pendleton. Victoria's attorneys say it's not true and pointed to what they call a pattern of mold problems. Their lawsuit claims even the temporary housing unit had mold.
We're seeing mold all over properties, right? Properties all throughout California. We're seeing cases outside of California, throughout the U.S.
In May, Team 10 discovered several lawsuits in the San Diego area that claim microbial spores or mold in military housing that's run by Lincoln or one of its subsidiaries or affiliated companies. In those lawsuits, several families claim they got sick living in Lincoln properties.
The problem is they think they're immune. The problem is they're looking at this kind of housing worldwide as an opportunistic way to make money. And they're monetizing what they've inherited with the government and government housing.
Victoria says she wants to create awareness about what she and others have gone through.
It's disgusting. I feel as a former service member, but like as a veteran, I feel that this company is taking advantage of us, and that's hurtful, right?
Adam Rakusin, ABC 10 News.
Victoria sent a letter to members of Congress detailing her experience and asking for policy changes to help prevent mold exposure in military housing. A spokesperson for Congressman Mike Levin's office says that they did receive her letter but do not have plans to introduce a bill at this time. We want to note, according to Lincoln's website, the company changed its name to Liberty Military Housing.
London loves being outside. That's good because she has asthma, and being inside her condo is a big problem.
When you take a bath upstairs, it started to rain in my room.
London lives with her mother and grandfather in their condo riddled with black mold.
Because I was packed with mold, everything might destroy.
The reason, the condo, a floor above them, has a busted shower pipe.
Every time they turn the shower on, it leaks down into the house.
For 4 months, the shower leaked water into the Sias's condo. Their neighbor wouldn't repair it.
He was like, I'm in foreclosure, I don't care.
As the mold spots grew, as the wet ceiling started to collapse, as Jules found mold on his clothes.
The clothes cost me money.
The association said they couldn't force the condo owner to repair his leak. The bank said they couldn't do anything because they had not officially foreclosed on the condo yet.
The only responses that we've been getting is basically disinterest.
And it wouldn't do any good for the Siases to try to get rid of the mold in their condo either.
As soon as we repaired it, the guy would take a shower, and it happened again.
Finally, the bank foreclosed and evicted their neighbor, but the damage was done.
From what we can see, it looks really bad. And I know with mold, it's worse inside of the wall.
Jules doesn't have insurance to pay to repair the condo and doesn't think he should have to pay anyway.
Someone's definitely responsible, and it's not my dad.
Well, Howard, this is the moldy mess. Who has to pay to repair it?
Once the owner of the condo became aware of their leaky shower, they are responsible for any damage to any other properties. Of course, since they are in foreclosure, the chances of collecting from them are slim. The bank that foreclosed is not responsible since the damage occurred before they took possession of the property. But odds are the bank took out insurance to protect their collateral, and that is who could have to pay for the repairs.
I started working on this in March. The bank referred me to their property preservation company. Things moved slowly. The mold got so bad the Siases had to move out and live with friends. Then this summer, an adjuster and the Siases finally agreed on a settlement. A check for $44,000 was sent to remove the mold and replace the walls and ceilings. That work is finally nearing an end.
The Siases own their condo. If you rent and you have mold or any other major problem, it's different. In that case, send the landlord a letter giving them 7 days to correct the problem. If they don't, you can break the lease and move out.
It's going to be beautiful, but that's after 7 months of being displaced.
London can soon move back home, and Amber can let her be inside without worrying about her daughter's health.
You ready to go back home? Be back around your friends? Oh, my nosy.
Isn't she cute? Now, if you don't have a mortgage, many people like the Siases don't pay for homeowners insurance. But this is a reminder, your insurance can save a long battle instead of fighting to get someone else to pay for the repairs. Also, Howard mentioned renters can send their landlord a letter giving them 7 days to correct a major problem. And if they don't, you can move out or in some cases withhold the rent. If you want to know how to write that letter, the links are at WSVN.com under this Help Me Howard story.
I couldn't explain it. I just dropped so much weight. I got down to 97 pounds.
Annette Davis struggled to understand what was happening to her body. For some time, she had been living with a condition called chronic fatigue syndrome, but was managing it with medication. Then in 2014, something changed.
I started cracking teeth because I was anemic. I had my hair falling out.
The trouble started after February of that year. A water cooling tower on the roof of her building. The tides at Bridgeside Square condos in Fort Lauderdale had a break that dumped all of that water down into the building.
I just started hearing what sounded like 30 bathtubs at once pouring behind my wall.
The property management company ACAM called in Alliance Restoration to address the water damage.
And they brought a dehumidifier and a couple fans.
So they never went into the wall?
No.
That's when Davis began to get really sick, but the cause was a mystery until 2017, when medical tests found toxins caused by fungus in her system. She asked the condo to test for mold behind the walls of her unit.
What he found was aspergillus, which is also what was found in my body.
This note from Davis's doctor states aspergillus exposure probably occurred in her apartment.
Mold professionals say when you get water behind your walls, the typical equipment you see, like dehumidifiers and air movers, on their own are not enough to prevent mold.
You definitely need to access that wall cavity. It's a necessity.
Pat Kayaza, a state-licensed mold remediator. He says creating airflow behind the wall is critical.
If you don't dry that out, eventually, soon, you're going to get mold. It will happen.
But photos from court documents show Alliance did remove parts of the wall in other units, just not in Davis's, even though they billed for the exact same work.
This company did the work in the tides in my client's unit without a license, without the proper insurance.
Davis's attorney Mitch Chused says the condo property manager ACAM was negligent by hiring Alliance to do the work. Alliance Restoration's website lists mold remediation among its services, but while we did find a license as a general contractor, we found no mold remediation license for anyone who worked in Davis's condo. No one at the Boca Raton office would talk with us about the lawsuit.
Can you at least tell me if you guys are licensed to do mold remediation work?
Listen, I'm just working over the summer. I don't know.
It's heartbreaking.
This mold can be particularly dangerous for someone like Davis, who already had a compromised immune system and now requires grueling monthly treatments.
Every 3 weeks, I'll have to, be hooked up to my IV pole for 8 hours a day.
She wants others to know more than she did.
If you're immune compromised and you're exposed to mold, it can kill you. So I'll be dealing with this for the rest of my life.
Amy Viteri, Local 10 News.
Toxic levels of mold in their dorm rooms.
News 4's Marissa Sula talked with students today. So, Marissa, how did they discover this?
Well, Marius, I talked to one residence assistant who lives here at the Highland Quad area here in Vanderbilt, and he tells me he had flu-like symptoms that wouldn't go away until he went home for Thanksgiving break. Now he's looking out for himself and his fellow residents. Residence halls are supposed to be a home away from home for students.
It's just a shame that, we have to live like this.
But as Aaron Chen, who lives in Vanderbilt's Highland Quad area, found out, the living conditions here are toxic with mold.
We, took down, the panels to our roof. And, sure, there's paint over it, but you can, chip it away and just see, everything. It's there. You can't ignore it.
We're hoping that we can hold Vanderbilt accountable.
Benjamin Bryce is Chen's RA, who discovered the mold last semester.
Just by chance, I'd seen a video of another student at another university who had mold in their dorm and was having the same symptoms. I thought, you know what if Vanderbilt has mold? And so I went up into my ceiling tile, I ripped it down, and what I saw, absolutely, my jaw hit the floor.
He says the mold explained the flu-like symptoms he couldn't shake off.
For the entirety of last semester, I had just this recurring cough and this just consistent upper respiratory inflammation. I had a sore throat every morning I woke up. I had a cough, stuffy nose, the whole deal, general malaise, brain fog.
Since then, over 100 residents reached out to him saying they had mold too. Half of those were confirmed. Bryce says, to Vanderbilt's credit, they did send out a maintenance crew and found a place for him to sleep one night.
Flat out said they didn't think it was mold. They were really frustrated they had to be there. They were angry, they were frustrated, and which was just shocking to me.
News 4 reached out to Vanderbilt University today. They say they conduct regular structural and hygienic inspections. They also have an on-staff hygienist, hired a third-party professional testing company, and work with students who file reports. But Bryce says he still wants to see more.
I want to change this for the future and change this for students that live on campus now, but time will tell.
Chen says in the next couple years, this complex will be torn down. But he and other students still pay room and board for an environment like this.
It's frustrating because, yes, it's like $12,000 for students to pay for housing.
Now, Bryce says as an RA, he tries to stay here as much as he can, but he says if he can get away, he will, because even a couple of hours outside of this residence hall can make a difference in his health. Tracy?
You know, we've talked about mold in a lot of reports over the years. We know it's bad for you. How do these students know this mold is toxic?
Well, Tracy, Bryce was able to get his hands on an industry-leading test, and I have the results right here, and they actually do show there's several varieties of mold that are 100 times above normal toxicity levels. There's also 2 types of mold that are 1,000 times above those normal levels. Marius?
Marissa, thank you so much.
So we're in Olalla today because one of our viewers has a complaint about mold.
You can see black mold spores, green and black mold, all throughout the entire kitchen. There's no protection for people like me, and I wanted you to maybe see what you can dig up and find out.
Which happens to be one of the most common complaints in Washington State. Steve, thanks so much for letting us be in your home. You're moving today.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yes. It's been pretty bad. It's been going on for quite a few months, and I've complained to the owner, who happens to live right behind me, and also Kitsap Property Management, who manages the property. And this happened on January 18th, and about 15 to 20 emails have gone out, and nothing has been done other than a tarp, as you can see on the roof, but none of the mold has been taken care of. I've done a mold test kit. It comes back as pretty much the worst of the worst. And unfortunately, there's laws in place, but there's nobody to actually help you. The RCWs are there, but the county doesn't come out and inspect for mold. And I contacted the Attorney General's office, and they said it was a civil matter, so I had to retain an attorney.
So, what laws are in place? If you're a renter, get to know the landlord-tenant law. In this case, it should protect Steve if he contacted the landlord in writing and gave him 10 days to respond. But Steve is right. The one roadblock is enforcement. His county health department, Kitsap County, says neither it nor the state monitors or enforces mold removal. Tell me about the journey that you've taken to try to rectify this.
Well, I've tried to get them to come in and fix things. One of the excuses was that he got some spray that he wanted to get, but it was going to take a few weeks because of the snow. I had mail that, a few days after the snow. One of the items that he wanted to do was actually come in and cut open the ceiling and just let it air dry. And I thought that was absolutely just unbearable for mold spores and mildew to just fly around. It's in every room. He's painted over almost the entire ceiling, hiding it for probably many, many years. So this has to get wet. It comes up green as, good. And you can see it's already kind of turning.
You can buy mold test kits online, and the American Lung Association also offers free air quality tests. But under the law, you should know if your landlord doesn't fix the issue, you can move out and get a prorated refund on your rent as well as your deposit.
What advice would you give anyone who might be in your situation? I mean, we're not going to solve your problem today, unfortunately, because you're clearly moving out, so you're solving it yourself.
Right.
But you could help people out there who could have the same issue that you have.
Honestly, I can't answer that. I don't know. I will be honest with you, I'm very fortunate with the job that I have that I can afford to find another home and to move. There's no reason that people should have to live and breathe in homes like this when they're paying rent. I mean, we all work hard for our money, and this is our place of solace, even if it isn't our own home.
This whole thing has been about so much loss.
Amy Patton wipes away tears talking about all the possessions she's had to throw away. 4 bags filled with damaged and irreplaceable items like her wedding and high school prom dresses and her daughter Amelia's school projects sit in her garage.
I just can't bring myself to get rid of them yet.
It all started last July when nearby Indian Creek overflowed with heavy rain. The flooding overwhelmed the Johnson County wastewater system, which backed up into her finished basement. Then it happened again in August. You can see where the water level was in her basement. Both times she cleaned up her unit, including taking out a complete bathroom. But her problems were just beginning.
I was concerned that the cleanup was also taking place next door in that vacant unit.
On August 10th, Patton sent this email to Young Management, the property manager for her condo association. She noted the empty unit next door had a mold mildew smell coming from it and was very concerned. The next day, Lindsay Anderson of Young Management replied and said she'd been out with board members to the empty apartment. Patton asked what she found, but Anderson didn't respond. A few days later, Patton went to her homeowners association board meeting. There, she was told the neighboring unit was infested with black mold, and it wasn't safe for Patton and her daughter to live next door.
I asked them at the meeting, the board, why the delay had happened. They told me they weren't sure how to handle it.
How would you characterize the response of the homeowners association?
Horrible.
Patton says on her own she was able to find out mortgage lender James B. Nutter & Company owned the vacant unit next door from a foreclosure. Patton says multiple attempts to get Nutter to clean up the property went nowhere. Then finally in October, Patton was told Nutter had cleaned the property, so she moved back to her condo. Recurring illnesses for Patton and Amelia quickly followed, including ear infections, bronchitis, asthma attacks, and severe headaches. But Patton says the most traumatic event was the death of her 2-year-old cat, Gus. Her vet says Gus likely died from black mold exposure. Gus's death has been especially tough for Amelia.
Having to tell her that her favorite family animal has died has been something that I don't wish on anybody.
When Patton spotted a worker going into the empty unit next door in October, she asked if she could come inside. She took pictures showing the entire basement covered in black mold. But the worker told Patton he was there just to take out the carpeting, not deal with the mold.
It's incredibly expensive.
All told, with cleanup, medical bills, and other expenses, Patton says she's out more than $20,000. And it costs her more than $1,400 a month to pay for a home she still, months later, can't live in.
I don't know when the journey's going to end. I didn't think I would be here in December when this started in July.
Body may start to notice before you ever see it. Our health reporter Haley Hernandez is here with the symptoms that your house has mold. Haley.
Good morning, guys. So a Woodlands mom, Emily Rochelle, wants to tell you what to look for. She's a survivor of toxic mold and in honor of her son, wants others to know what you can do to protect your family.
This is called the mycotoxin.
After being dismissed by a number of doctors, Emily says she found a mold specialist who confirmed her house was the reason for her chronic pain and fatigue. 2 years later, her family's in a new home, physically better but still agonizing about what mold did. Emily says her baby died after birth and she blames his death on toxic mold.
Well, there needs to be more testing options when people are continually going back to doctor's office.
Mold can cause asthma attacks, eye, throat, skin, and nose irritation, headaches, stuffiness, and wheezing. Emily says it's from mycotoxins.
That's what the mold produces that goes into the air. That's what you inhale. That's what lands on you.
Emily says her experience led her and her husband on a business adventure to help others detox. Josh says knowing where to look and identifying a problem can save your health. With this tool, he's able to check humidity levels, which should be about 50 or below.
And it will take weeks if you do not have professional industrial equipment to dry out the wood.
But with such widespread hurricane damage and not enough mold inspectors across the region, homeowners are rushing to fix houses.
Every inspector is completely busy right now, and that's my other fear, is that they're not going to want to wait.
According to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, to prevent mold, keep your house clean and dry, fix water problems such as leaks, always use ventilation fans in bathrooms and kitchens, and if possible, keep the humidity in your house below 50%, which is what I was just showing you. You can do that by using an air conditioner or dehumidifier.
Yeah, very important.
Yeah, Keith, the Baker family says it's plain and simple. We reported black mold inside of our apartment and then we were evicted. The apartment complex, of course, tells it differently, says that's not why the Baker family was evicted. But it brings us to the essential question is, as a tenant, what's the right way to deal with this?
My wife's wedding dress, it's kind of weird to see your whole life in a dumpster.
A painful and frustrating moving day for the Bakers. Mom, dad, toddler Stella, and puppy Lulu, evicted after reporting mold growing inside their apartment. What a certified expert labeled as black, toxic, potentially dangerous Stachybotrys.
This is not safe. I can't sleep at night knowing there's other babies and families, elderly, pregnant women just that are at extreme risk.
Danielle, point out to me which neighbors have had mold issues to your knowledge.
I know we've had mold. 904 has had mold. And I know that the upper right apartment up here, I know they have mold.
3 separate tenants at the Schuyler Point Apartments, that's near NASA, told us Monday when they approached management about the problem, they got no sympathy, no temporary quarters, and no fix. And at least one family got no tolerance for withholding rent.
At 5 p.m. on a Friday is when they posted the eviction notice.
And they posted it on anybody's door who didn't pay rent on the first, and they've never done that before.
You know the moldy apartments, the moldy ones? Oh, you got to know about it. It's a whole block of apartments has mold all over the interior.
I don't know which ones you guys are talking about. I don't even know what is going on.
So an attorney for the apartment complex tells me that they did their own mold test. They're awaiting the results at this point, but they want to be clear that nobody was evicted because of reporting mold. You can, of course, be evicted for withholding rent. It's very tricky in Texas to do that and essentially do it legally. So instead, here is a process. You document the problem. You call management to fix the problem. You give them 7 days to do that. And if there's still no fix, you send them a certified letter that you're going to move out. Now, that doesn't always protect you, but it is, in many cases, a better way to go than just simply withholding rent, even if you think you're in the right and it's a health and safety issue. For now, we're live near NASA. I'm Joel Eisenbaum, KPRC Channel 2 News.
This is supposed to be my home.
A Fargo woman reached out to our whistleblower hotline because she says the company that manages her apartment isn't doing anything about the mold she has inside.
The woman says she saw the story we ran last night where it talked about a Fargo man who lived in a Goldmark apartment that had a hole in a wall due to mold. He said at that time he waited several weeks for the wall to be fixed. Well, tonight we can update that story by telling you that repairs are now being made.
As mentioned, today we're learning that someone else is dealing with a similar issue. Valley News Team's Katie Opperly sees what's being done to fix it.
Hey, blowing off something like this is not an okay situation.
Donna Brink lives in the Pacific Park Apartments in South Fargo. She says she has been begging Goldmark management to get her leaking living room window fixed, but it never got done.
We'll get back to you later. We'll call you later. And no call, no nothing.
Then she said she was getting ready to decorate her apartment for the holidays when she discovered that this had become a much larger issue.
Went to wash the wall and the cracked peeling paint kind of came off and I started to see the mold.
Brink says she called management to tell them that under her leaking window, there is now what she suspects is mold.
They had a maintenance guy that showed up an hour or two later, got on the phone and said, oh, I'm at the place where she's got mold on her wall, and he left, said he would be back, and I haven't seen or heard from them since.
She says she has called multiple times and even stopped by to ask for help, but weeks have gone by and nothing has changed.
Sometimes it feels like you're hounding them to try to get them to fix anything, and they won't do it.
And she says this is not the first time she's had a problem. She says she's had water leakage in many different parts of her apartment. In fact, Brink had her entire kitchen replaced after extensive water damage.
I'm tired of dealing with mold. I'm tired of asking and begging for them to fix things.
Brink says she just wants a home where she doesn't have to constantly wonder when something will go wrong. In Fargo, Katie Opperly, Valley News Live.
CBS 46 working to get results for a single mother who says, listen to this, mushrooms are sprouting from her carpet. Thanks for staying with us. I'm Sean Gables.
And I'm Rick Volbaum. These pictures are a little tough to look at, especially in the dinner hour. But you can see why this woman is concerned. This is happening at the Austell Village Apartments. Mulkey Road in Cobb County is the location. CBS 46's Adam Murphy is live there now with the very latest. Adam.
Good evening, Rick. The problem surfaced about 3 months ago and has created some serious health issues for the family living at this apartment complex.
I had water coming from behind this toilet here, so my whole floor kept being wet.
Just when she thought it couldn't get worse, a water leak in Bianca Gordon's apartment led to mold and then to mushrooms.
I just want something to be done.
Gordon moved into the Austell Village Apartments last May. Since then, she has paid more than $400 for a mold test and hundreds more in medical costs after being diagnosed with a fungal infection on her right foot.
And then I got the mushroom on my foot, so I had to miss work from that too because my job, I have to walk, so I'm just like, it's been hard.
At her wit's end, Gordon reached out to Cobb Legal Aid for help after management served her with an eviction notice.
This is probably one of the most egregious cases we've ever seen. To have mushrooms growing out of your carpet, to mold to be that bad, and to see a landlord not doing anything to fix it.
In search of a solution, I went to the leasing office to question the property manager, but someone locked the door and closed the blinds. Wait a minute, who do we need to call? Closing the blinds doesn't help. Moments later, I convinced an employee to provide a contact to the S&S corporate office.
I'm like, I'm not going to keep having to pay for an apartment that is not livable. Like, I've sent you numerous emails, I sent maintenance requests, calls, and nothing's being done.
But certainly we would be seeking the eviction be dismissed on the basis that they actually owe her money. She doesn't owe them rent. They actually owe her money in compensation for all of these things.
This is wet. They don't want to acknowledge that this ceiling is wet. I can pick this whole ceiling up.
Every corner you turn, Brandon Murray showed me signs of what he believes is mold.
And they covered up all this black mold. They literally linoleumed over it.
After a month of trying to get the problem fixed by the complex, Brandon had his own mold inspection done.
The lowest number it'll pick up is 7, and ours are at 293,942 per square meter. That'd be the spore count.
Brandon says owners of the Laurels offered him a $1,000 moving expense, and when he turned it down, he got a letter of eviction. It's not just mold. Another neighbor claims there are also signs of termites.
I mean, I brought up termites 6 to 8 months ago, still nothing done. After like 2 to 5 minutes, my chest starts to close up and my throat starts to close up and I get a lot of pressure around my head.
I reached out to the property owners to figure out what's being done. I received a statement from the district manager of Aspen Square Management, who owns the Laurels, saying they respond promptly and quickly to all requests and have company policies and procedures in place to resolve any issues.
Something to change here for the people's safety, not only ours, but everyone's.
There's nothing else I can do other than get out of here to save me and my family's life. I fear for me and my family's life at this point.
We visited the Taylors' home on Turf Avenue earlier this month, just before they moved out after 2.5 years.
This right here, all of this was black.
Despite not making enough to find another unit, she says her doctor advised her to move for her and her family's health, and she agreed, saying that being broke is better than being dead.
My husband, since I've been here, has been diagnosed with lung disease, and he's a stroke patient from this toxic mold. I have vertigo and a lot more going on with me. My grandbaby has had to have surgery, emergency surgery, because she was in sleep apnea where she was snoring loud and she couldn't breathe.
The Taylors are now in their second motel room since leaving December 3rd. These photos taken during a mold check inside the house's locked HVAC closet reveal a rather unpleasant look along the metal and pipes.
I do not have access to this, so I didn't know the mold was here when I moved here.
But HHA Executive Director Antonio McGinnis wasn't impressed with the images. I mean, these pictures, they do look kind of gross.
Again, I'm not a mold expert, so at this point I'm not going to comment. All I can do is comment on the results that we got from the professionals, and once they provided us with the results or their assessment, our team followed up and did what they recommended we do.
The professionals HHA hired, Integrity Heating and Cooling, did evaluate the Taylors' home and concluded on paper it was not too unhealthy.
We contract with the professionals based on the assessment to do everything that was recommended during the assessment. After that, the job is pretty much complete, and that's how we treat all of our residents.
But before moving out, a November inspection by another company hired by Taylor herself determined the home was, quote, not habitable and poses extreme risk to safety and health. This grandmother now wants answers and help for her family.
I paid $1,875 to get my test done. I have no lie. I will turn this in. I will give it to who I need to give it to.
In Huntsville, Samson Tamajani, News 19.
My name's Eileen Oshie White, and I'm chief of Northwest Angle 37. I've always had a great love for my community. I've pretty much grown up here most of my life. I've seen it grow. I mean, as small as it is, it's grown quite a lot since as a little girl. I really have a big heart for my community.
My name is Marianne Cowley, and I am the housing manager for our First Nation, Northwest Angle 37. I maintain the housing stock. I work closely with the chief and council, training, basic home maintenance, HRV maintenance, mold remediation.
I know with some homes in our community in the past few years, we've had like extreme levels of mold in the home where we've had to complete like renovation.
I did have a couple tenants come regarding mold issues, more of in the crawl space area. So I think it is a community issue.
My name's Keith Smith. I'm an environmental health officer. Environmental health officers actually go out to First Nations and work with the First Nations peoples to help them in any issues that may come about in the natural or built environment that may affect their health. Mold for housing is an issue because there are health implications for it, for those people that are more vulnerable, immunocompromised, the older people, the younger people, those ones are more susceptible to it.
There have been cases in our community where a few people have gotten sick with it. A member from neighboring community in Kumegwaning who's quite ill in the hospital right now. It's almost life-threatening, actually.
Mold itself does affect our health and our well-being. I do remember hearing of families with like asthma problems.
For those people that are immunocompromised, it really seems like you get more colds, more flu-like symptoms. That can be an indication that you're getting a little bit too much mold into your system and it's negatively impacting on you.
Now that I'm seeing more people having asthma problems, we're trying to educate ourselves, educate our people, and hopefully we can take more preventative measures in dealing with mold.
For all of the First Nations that I've ever been to and had the pleasure of working with, they really do have a good sense of community. And that can lead to a really, really effective method for getting rid of or making sure that mold doesn't grow. Because really what you want is everybody doing their part.
I think it's just an overwhelming amount of stuff to deal with, right? So you have the medical stuff, which I think has been the most difficult. But then because we couldn't afford a contractor to come in and just build an entire house for us, I mean, I'll stay up till 1 o'clock in the morning figuring out material to build a new house. I mean, it's insane. And then dealing with all the contractors and permitting and I mean, we also do have our son with special needs, and there's a lot of additional things that we have to do just to, make sure he's getting the support that he needs and deserves. And so I think just day to day, everything piled together, it's just a lot.
Ashley Rutkowski is struggling. Ashley and her husband Mike bought an old home in rural Racine County in 2014. They fixed it up, had 2 young children, Nolan and Brooklyn, and life was good. Everything changed when the entire family got sick, really sick. It ends up the house was infested with mold and the house had to be torn down. We recently met the family there. We're standing with where you live now, behind you. When you see this camper looking out where you used to have a beautiful house, how difficult is that?
It's tough. I mean, every day we can't wait to get back into our house and just kind of resume life. I mean, I'm fortunate that we're all still alive. We're all here together, going through this journey together, but we just want to resume some sense of normalcy. I think, the camper, it's provided so much for us. We've been in there for almost a year, and we're able to cook and go to the bathroom and take showers and sleep and stuff, and we find little room to play with the kids, but it's just, we don't have our own space anymore. I mean, if it is home right now, but sometimes it just doesn't feel like home anymore. And I think when you get that part of you, like your home's taken away, there's just like a little piece of you that's missing.
How tough's it been on your marriage?
It's been tough at the fact that
That's okay. After the interview, Mike told me that one of the side effects of the mold poisoning is that during times of stress or anxiety, he gets brain fog. It's tough to even complete thoughts.
The hardest part probably has been the health part for all of us. It really affected, like my job and being able to work and support the family. It's kind of affected our relationship in a way. Being able to play with my kids because I get done working all day and I just don't feel well, and I'm just exhausted from being sick, and being able to just come home and play with the kids has been tough too.
So how stressful is it on your marriage when you don't feel good, the stuff needs to be done, you have to raise children?
Yeah.
How stressful is that?
I mean, I can't remember the last time we've taken a date or gone on a date together and just been able to sit down and relax. I mean, usually when we sit down, we're talking about like what's hurting today, how tired we feel, like we just need to go to bed and get this day over with. I mean, I think just not having that feeling of just feeling free and wanting to be together with that part of it gone, it's been a challenge. I think too with the camper, I mean, you know, you think of in a house, kids have their bedrooms and stuff to play in. We're all together always.
But it can be stressful at times. They're kind of like, they need their space to play. We kind of need our space, but we're all kind of on top of each other, so it gets to be stressful sometimes.
Hanging out with the kids, it seems they're getting healthier. Mike and Ashley, not so much. Their struggle continues.
Yeah, so I look back like before we got sick, right? And our family, we did so much together. We would go hiking together. We were always exploring new places, just always getting out there and doing stuff. And I feel like ever since we got sick, it's just a struggle on a day-to-day basis just to get by with basic chores, just taking care of them, just surviving through this. And we just want to get to the point again where we can be together and actually enjoy our time together and not just in that survival mode anymore.
The debt is real. The Rutkowskis owe $217,000 on a mortgage on a house that no longer exists. And uncovered medical bills exceed $30,000 and are climbing.
It's just been a constant battle back and forth of just being sick, and it's been fun.
The Senate Armed Services Committee today got an earful from military families living in unhealthy conditions. The plague of problems on bases includes mold, lead paint, and rats. Here's Jan Crawford.
I'm infuriated by what I'm hearing today. Senators were outraged to hear the testimony about conditions in some of the 200,000 homes on military bases that are managed by private contractors. Marine spouse Crystal Cornwall spoke of issues she had at Camp Pendleton and other families experienced at Camp Lejeune.
I have felt the helplessness of a fellow Marine Corps spouse as she held her new baby and sobbed while we stood under a collapsing, moldy ceiling in her home at Camp Lejeune.
Cornwall helped organize a Facebook group that now has nearly 2,000 members who have shared their horror stories.
Those are termites.
Airman Josh Sandin and his wife Lacey have lived in this house at Fort Meade in Maryland for over 2 years.
We started noticing issues from almost the very beginning.
Appliances started breaking. Siding on their 8-year-old house was warped.
You can see all along this wall.
And they suspected mold growing on the floor and walls was affecting their children's health. The Sandins' rent is covered by the Air Force, which pays a basic housing allowance of nearly $2,200 a month directly to contractor Corvius Military Living. The company's CEO was at today's hearing, one of several housing company executives grilled by senators.
We let down some of our residents. I am sorry, and we are going to fix it.
Shannon Razadin, a Navy wife, collected complaints from more than 7,000 tenants across the nation through her group, the Military Family Advisory Network.
They shared stories of black mold, of lead paint, of rats, roaches, bats.
She said many service members don't have any recourse.
They don't have the opportunity to withhold a rent check. They don't have the luxury of going to look at housing before they move.
Mold, spiders, roaches, and safety issues. Just a few of the things families all across the country are dealing with when they live in military housing. It's also happening at Fort Campbell. Families spoke out tonight about the ongoing problems at their homes on post. News Channel 5's Emily Luxon explains what's being done to address the issue.
We're troubled by recent reports of substandard conditions.
Fort Campbell soldiers and their families had strong feelings when asked about the quality of their housing on post.
We have mold in every bathroom in our house.
I fell asleep to the sound of mice scratching and running through the walls.
Around 200 people attended a town hall meeting designed to address their concerns.
How ready can a soldier be if he or she's worried about the quality of their home and the safety of their family in that home?
There are around 4,400 privatized homes on post, which are managed by the company Campbell Crossing. Fort Campbell command staff and representatives from the company were on hand to listen to each complaint.
As you all know, I mean, that is not satisfactory. That is not that is not the agreement that we had.
The meeting comes after military families from across the country shared horror stories about the conditions in their homes at a Senate Armed Services Committee hearing.
Termites fell out of light fixtures into our beds.
Mold was growing out of the wall of our shower.
I'm infuriated by what I'm hearing today.
Fort Campbell families say their housing headaches have been happening for a while.
They pretty much gave me the round then. They're giving it to me now.
But they hope the meeting will be the first step towards seeing improvements. Campbell Crossing said they would directly address all of the issues brought up at the meeting, and Fort Campbell has also set up a new housing hotline where people can report any problems. That number's on your screen and also under this story on newschannel5.com. Reporting at Fort Campbell, Emily Luxon, News Channel 5.
Emily, thank you.
Much tempers flared today at the United States Capitol at a hearing to address housing concerns on military bases across the U.S. 10 Investigates has told you for months about the complaints and health issues that some families living on MacDill Air Force Base have had to deal with, many of them with mold being the issue at the center. Now, 10 Investigates' Jennifer Titus tells us U.S. senators on the Committee of Services want those issues taken care of now.
They sure do. I mean, look at these pictures of the substandard housing at MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa. Families are ill, and they say it's all because of the mold growing in some of their homes. And it's not just at MacDill where these problems are being reported. It's happening all across the country at Naval, Army, and Air Force bases.
You know, maybe some of the CEOs need to move into some military housing over the holidays. What do you guys think about that? And see how they feel about trying to figure out where they're going to put up their Christmas tree or where they're going to be serving Christmas dinner.
That was the attitude from most of the senators on the Armed Services Committee who say these issues are unacceptable. One senator said the private companies responsible for the housing on bases needs to be fired. But right now they are under an agreement with these companies, and to break the agreement would cost money. Senator Rick Scott even asked the secretaries of each military branch if it would take new legislation to get something done.
But we can pass legislation that require the private companies to change. Right? We could pass.
I believe that would still require negotiation with the partners because of the existing standing legal agreements, many of which are 50-year agreements.
Senator Scott, they're looking for some sort of solution. What it comes down to, though, is the money that it will take to fix all of the homes that are deemed unsafe. That money is not available until the National Defense Authorization Act of 2020 is passed. It is currently tied up in the Senate. The committee will meet again sometime early next year. For all of our coverage on mold in military housing, visit the 10 Investigates page under our app.
U.S. Army Captain Samuel Cho traveled all the way from his post in South Korea to Capitol Hill.
No one else will speak up for my daughter.
Describing in painful detail the severe eczema she suffers after their family lived in a mold-infested home at Fort Gordon, Georgia. Cho was one of several service members who testified before a Senate investigative committee probing Balfour Beatty, one of the nation's largest private military housing companies. A panel report found the contractor has engaged in ongoing mistreatment and mismanagement that has put the health and safety of military families at risk. Senator John Ossoff chaired the review.
We're talking about lead, asbestos, mold, and mildew, ceilings falling in, requests for urgent maintenance never acted on. It's completely unacceptable.
Last year, the company pleaded guilty to fraud and was fined $65 million for falsifying work orders to obtain performance bonuses from the military.
Why should we believe, Mr. Taylor, that a company that engaged in major fraud against the United States is fixing this?
Things go wrong. We don't always get it right the first time. We're not perfect.
Their explanation, I believe, is very coached.
At this point, what do you want?
There is no resolution for my daughter, but I would like for her to have the quality of life that she deserves.
Her skin became hardened and rough and reptilian in nature, and where if she were to scratch it, it would break easily and she would bleed profusely.
He says a base physician diagnosed her with severe atopic dermatitis, blaming mold in their home as the likely cause, kicking off a months-long battle with the base's housing contractor, Balfour Beatty. First to remove the mold, then to break their lease when the company failed to do so.
I can't imagine how frustrating that must be for you as a dad to want to be able to help your daughter.
Absolutely. We found it very frustrating because it was delayed over and over and over again.
Balfour Beatty operates more than 43,000 homes at 55 U.S. bases. The Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations today citing numerous instances in which the company failed to properly respond to both repairs and environmental hazards, including mold. Technical Sergeant Jack Fay Torres was forced out of his home on a Texas air base for 12 weeks of mold removal.
These displacements caused my family great amounts of stress, as you can imagine.
Last December, Balfour Beatty pleaded guilty to major fraud against the United States, ordered to pay more than $65 million in fines and restitution. Today, the company's executives on the hot seat.
Why should we believe, Mr. Taylor, that a company been engaged in major fraud against the United States is fixing this?
I reject the suggestion that it's a systemic failure. Things go wrong. We don't always get it right the first time. We're not perfect.
Now stationed in South Korea, Captain Cho flew 7,000 miles to make sure these failures would be the last.
No one else will speak up for my daughter.
Her skin, once youthful and supple, is now reptilian in nature, to where there were numerous times she would wake up in the middle of the night, hands covered in blood. How do you explain to an 8-year-old child why she should endure something like that?